So, I need to preface this by saying that I'm not someone who spooks easily. I've always been the type to rationalize every weird occurrence with some logical explanation. But what happened to me a few months ago has left me questioning everything. This story is long, but I need to get it all out there. Maybe someone can help me understand what the hell is going on. It all started one night when I was bored out of my mind, aimlessly browsing the internet. I'm not proud of it, but I found myself wandering into the darker corners of the web. I'd heard all the stories about the dark web, about the horrors lurking in its hidden corners, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see if the stories were true, if there were really those sinister sites that everyone whispered about. I installed Tor, followed the usual precautions, and began my descent. At first, it was just like any other anonymous browsing experience, albeit a bit more unnerving. The usual forums, chat rooms, and shady marketplaces popped up. I kept my distance, only reading what others had to say. The deeper I went, the more unsettling it became. Eventually, I stumbled upon a forum that promised true dark web experiences, boasting about unspeakable things. I should have closed my laptop right then and there, but, like I said, curiosity got the better of me. I read through some of the threads. Most were probably fake, just trolls trying to scare people off. But one post caught my eye. It was titled, Mystery Box Challenge. The poster claimed that for a fee, they would send you a box with a random dark web item. The replies were mixed. Some said it was a scam, others claimed they received bizarre and creepy things. I wasn't about to send my address to some random person on the dark web, so I moved on. That's when things got weird. About a week later, a package showed up at my door. There was no return address, just my name and address handwritten on the front in a messy scrawl. I wasn't expecting anything, so I was immediately suspicious. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it for what felt like an eternity. My wife, Sarah, was out with the kids, so I was alone. It was just me and this mysterious box. Finally, I decided to open it. Inside, there was only one thing: a photograph. I pulled it out and felt my blood run cold. It was a picture of my family and me, taken just a few days ago. We were in our living room, smiling at the camera. It was a nice family photo, except for one detail. I had no memory of anyone taking it. I flipped the photo over, hoping for some kind of explanation. But there was nothing. Just a plain, glossy photo of my family. I searched the box again, but there was nothing else. No note, no clue as to who sent it or why. I felt a sickening dread wash over me. Who took this photo? How did they get it? And why the hell did they send it to me? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. Was someone watching us? Had someone broken into our house without us knowing? I felt violated, like someone had invaded our private life and was now toying with us. I checked all the doors and windows, making sure everything was locked. I even went outside and checked the perimeter of the house, but found nothing out of the ordinary. When Sarah and the kids got home, I didn't mention the box. I didn't want to scare them until I knew more. Instead, I spent the night scouring the house, looking for hidden cameras or any sign that someone had been inside. I found nothing. No fingerprints, no scratches on the windows, nothing. It was like the photo had just appeared out of thin air. I barely slept that night. Every creak and groan of the house had me on edge. I kept the photo next to me, staring at it, hoping to find some hidden detail that would explain everything. But there was nothing. Just our smiling faces, captured in a moment that shouldn't exist. The next morning, I was exhausted, but determined to get to the bottom of this. I started by checking all our devices for any signs of hacking. Maybe someone had accessed our camera remotely, but there were no unusual logins or activity. Everything seemed normal. I was about to give up when I noticed something strange about the photo. In the background, just barely visible, was a shadowy figure standing by the window. It was so faint that I hadn't noticed it before, but now that I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that someone had been in our house, watching us, and they were still out there, somewhere, watching. That was just the beginning. What happened next was far worse, and it's something I still struggle to understand, but I'll save that for the next part. If anyone has any idea what I should do, please let me know. I'm at a loss here, and I'm starting to fear for my family's safety. I spent the next few days in a haze of paranoia. Every time I left the house, I found myself looking over my shoulder, scanning the street for anything or anyone suspicious. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I didn't tell Sarah what I'd found in the photo, the shadowy figure, because I didn't want to alarm her. Instead, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I installed security cameras around the house, inside and out. I told Sarah it was for peace of mind, given the recent uptick in break-ins around the neighborhood. A little white lie to keep her from worrying. She agreed it was a good idea, and I felt a bit better knowing that if anyone tried to approach our house again, I'd catch them on camera. But deep down, I knew this was more than just a break-in. Someone had been inside our home, taken a photo of us, and left it as a message. But what was the message, and who would do something like this? I decided to take another look at the photo, hoping to glean any additional details I might have missed. I examined it under a magnifying glass, scrutinizing every inch. That's when I noticed another detail that made my blood run cold. In the corner of the photo, on the window pane behind the shadowy figure, was a reflection. A reflection of a face. It was hard to make out, but the eyes were unmistakable. They were wide open, staring directly at the camera. It was as if the person knew exactly what they were doing, ensuring their presence would be known but not easily detected. The face was pale, gaunt, with a twisted, almost malicious grin. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was this person? And why were they doing this to us? As days turned into weeks, the feeling of being watched never left me. I checked the security footage obsessively, but nothing out of the ordinary appeared. No strange figures lurking around, no signs of break-ins. It was as if the person had disappeared into thin air. But I knew better. They were still out there, waiting for the right moment. Then, one night, I got my answer. It was late and everyone else was asleep. I was reviewing the footage from the day, as had become my nightly routine, when I saw something that made my heart stop. There, on the camera feed from the living room, was a figure standing by the window. The same shadowy figure from the photo. They were motionless, staring directly at the camera. It was as if they knew I was watching. I froze, not sure what to do. Should I call the police? But what would I tell them? That someone was standing outside my window, watching my family? It sounded insane. I decided to wait and see what the figure would do. After what felt like an eternity, they moved. Slowly, they raised a hand and pointed directly at the camera. Then, just as slowly, they turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I sat there, shaking, trying to process what I had just seen. It felt like a warning. But of what? I had no idea who this person was, or what they wanted from us. All I knew was that they were dangerous. The next morning, I decided to come clean to Sarah. I showed her the photo and the footage, explaining everything that had happened. She was understandably freaked out, but surprisingly supportive. We agreed that we needed to get to the bottom of this, for our family's safety. We called the police, who came and took a report. They reviewed the footage, but there wasn't much they could do. The figure was too far away and too shadowy to identify. They promised to increase patrols in our neighborhood, but that was little comfort. The person hadn't tried to break in. They were playing a game, and we were the unwitting participants. Days turned into weeks, and then months. The figure never reappeared on the cameras, and the sense of being watched slowly faded. We started to relax, thinking maybe it was all over. Maybe the person had gotten bored and moved on. But then, one night, another package arrived. This time, it was a small, unmarked box. I felt a sense of dread wash over me as I opened it. Inside, there was a small USB drive and a note. The note simply read, "Watch me." I plugged the USB drive into my laptop, and a single video file popped up. With shaking hands, I clicked the play. The video was grainy and dark, but I recognized the setting immediately. It was our living room. The footage showed the same shadowy figure standing by the window, but this time, there was audio. A low, raspy voice spoke, sending chills down my spine. "Do you know who I am?" The figure moved closer to the camera, the same twisted grin visible in the dim light. "I know everything about you, your family, your secrets, and I'm always watching." The video cut out, leaving me in stunned silence. This wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration. Whoever this person was, they were in control, and they wanted me to know it. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the dark, clutching the USB drive, trying to make sense of it all. The police were no help. The security cameras were no deterrent. I felt utterly powerless. And then it hit me. The dark web. The mystery box challenge. I had read about it, dismissed it as a scam, but what if it was real? What if, by simply reading that post, I had somehow invited this nightmare into my life? I knew what I had to do. I had to go back to the dark web, find that post, and figure out who was behind this. It was the only way to end this nightmare. As I prepared to dive back into the dark web, a sense of dread settled over me. I was about to face the unknown, to confront a darkness I could barely comprehend. But I had no choice. My family's safety depended on it. I knew returning to the dark web was a risk, but it felt like the only option. My family was in danger, and I needed answers. I waited until everyone was asleep, then booted up my laptop, reinstalled Tor, and prepared to dive back into the abyss. Navigating the dark web wasn't as easy as I remembered. It felt more sinister this time, the shadows darker, and the whispers more menacing. I retraced my steps, trying to find the forum where I had first seen the mystery box challenge. Hours passed, and frustration built as I came up empty-handed. Then, just as I was about to give up, I found it. The forum looked the same, but the posts had changed. There was no longer any mention of the mystery box challenge, but I found a thread titled Answers. The post was cryptic, with a link to a private chat room and a single sentence. For those seeking the truth. I hesitated. This could be a trap. But I was desperate. I clicked the link and was redirected to a dark, empty chat room. The screen remained blank for a few minutes before a message popped up. User 1212. Welcome back. I jumped. How did they know I was here before? My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed back. Me. Who are you? There was a long pause. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. User 1212. The question is, who are you? A shiver ran down my spine. Was this the person who had sent the package? The one who had been watching us? Me. I need answers. You sent the box, didn't you? User 1212. Maybe, maybe not. But you wanted to play the game. Now you're in it. Me. What game? What do you want from me? User 1212. It's not about what I want. It's about what you fear. The cryptic responses were infuriating. I needed concrete answers. Me. I need to protect my family. Tell me how to stop this. User 1212. You can't stop what's already begun. But you can understand. Follow the clues. Before I could respond, the chat room went dark, and I was kicked out. I tried to reconnect, but the link was dead. I sat back, staring at the screen, feeling a mixture of anger and fear. What clues? Where was I supposed to start? I reviewed everything again. The box, the photo, the USB drive. There had to be something I missed. As I replayed the video from the USB drive, a thought struck me. What if there was something hidden in the video? A clue I hadn't seen before? I downloaded a video editing software and began to analyze the footage frame by frame. It was tedious work, but I was determined. Hours went by, and I found nothing. Then, just as I was about to give up, I noticed something strange. In one of the frames, there was a flash of text, barely visible. I enhanced the frame, trying to make out the words. Look behind you. My blood ran cold. I spun around, half expecting to see the shadowy figure standing there. But there was nothing. Just the silent, empty room. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. This was another game, another way to mess with my head. I turned back to the video, rewinding to see if I had missed anything else. As I did, my laptop screen flickered and went black. Panic set in as I tried to reboot it, but it wouldn't turn on. My laptop, my only connection to the dark web and any potential answers, was dead. Frustration and fear gripped me. How was I supposed to follow the clues if I couldn't even access them? I paced the room, trying to think. There had to be another way. Then I remembered something. I had an old desktop computer in the attic, a relic from my college days. It wasn't much, but it might work. I hurried upstairs, rummaging through the boxes until I found it. I set it up in the living room, praying it would still function. After a few tense moments, the old machine whirred to life. It was slow, but it worked. I reinstalled Tor and began my search again. This time, I was more careful, more deliberate. I went back to the forum, searching for any new clues. It didn't take long before I found another thread, this one titled, The Next Step. The post was a single line: "Find the red door." A red door. What the hell did that mean? I thought about it for a moment, then remembered something from the video. In the background, behind the shadowy figure, there was a door, a red door. But it wasn't in my house. Where had I seen it before? Then it hit me. It was the basement door at my childhood home, the house I hadn't been to in years, the house where my parents had died in a tragic accident. I knew what I had to do, but the thought of going back there filled me with dread. That place held too many painful memories. But if it meant protecting my family, I had no choice. I told Sarah I needed to visit an old friend, a small lie to keep her from worrying. She gave me a puzzled look, but didn't press the issue. I packed a bag and set off on the long drive to my childhood home, the place I had sworn never to return to. As I drove, memories flooded back. The happy times, the laughter, and then the tragedy that had torn my family apart. I tried to push the thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. I had to find that red door and whatever clue it held. I arrived at the old house late in the afternoon. It looked exactly as I remembered, yet different. The paint was peeling, the yard overgrown. It had been abandoned for years, left to decay. I felt a pang of sadness as I walked up the steps and unlocked the front door. The air inside was stale, the house filled with the ghosts of the past. I made my way to the basement door, the one painted a deep crimson red. My hands trembled as I turned the knob and descended the creaky stairs. The basement was dark and damp, filled with old furniture and boxes of forgotten memories. I searched the room, looking for any sign of a clue. Then, I saw it. Taped to the back of the red door was an envelope, my name scrawled on the front in the same messy handwriting as the package. I opened it with shaking hands, pulling out a single sheet of paper. It read, "You're getting closer, but are you ready for the truth?" Inside the envelope was another USB drive. My heart raced as I pocketed it and hurried back up the stairs. I needed to know what was on it, but something told me that whatever I found, it would change everything. As I drove back home, a sense of impending doom settled over me. I was about to uncover the truth, but at what cost? The game was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. The drive back home felt like an eternity. My mind was racing with questions and fears about what the USB drive might reveal. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had set, casting long shadows across our yard. I steeled myself, knowing that whatever was on this drive could bring me one step closer to ending this nightmare, or plunge me even deeper into it. I hurried inside, nodding briefly to Sarah, who was busy with the kids. I couldn't afford any distractions. I locked myself in the study, plugged the USB drive into my old desktop, and opened the lone file on it. This time, it was a document. I clicked it open and began to read. The document was a series of journal entries dating back several decades. As I read through them, a horrifying story began to unfold. March 3rd, 1985. I've been watching them for weeks now. The family in the blue house on Oak Street. They seem so happy, so content. It's almost sickening. But soon, I'll make them see the truth. They'll understand that happiness is an illusion. April 15th, 1985. The first phase is complete. I managed to get inside while they were out. I left a little surprise for them in the living room. A photo of them, taken from their own window. It's amazing how people feel safe behind their walls, oblivious to the eyes watching them. May 10th, 1985. They're starting to notice. The father is paranoid, checking the doors and windows constantly. Good. Let him feel the fear. It's only the beginning. June 2nd, 1985. The game is progressing nicely. I left another photo, this time with a hint of what's to come. A shadow in the background, a face in the window. They're terrified. Perfect. July 19th, 1985. The father went to the police today. Fool. They won't help him. They can't protect him from what's coming. No one can. My hands were trembling as I read the entries. The dates were decades old, but the events described mirrored exactly what my family was going through. It was as if history was repeating itself. I continued reading, desperate to find out how it all ended. August 25th, 1985. It's time for the final phase. They'll never see it coming. The father is frantic. trying to protect his family, but it's too late. The end is near. September 1st, 1985, it's done. The family is broken. The father, well, let's just say he won't be a problem anymore. As for the rest, they'll live with the fear for the rest of their lives, a fitting punishment for their ignorance. The last entry sent chills down my spine. Whoever had written this journal had targeted another family in the exact same way, driving them to the brink of madness. And now, it was happening to us. I sat back, trying to process everything. The person behind this was methodical, patient, and deeply disturbed. But why? What was the point of this twisted game? As I pondered, another thought struck me. The journal was old, but the methods were the same. Could it be the same person? Or was this some sort of sick tradition passed down through generations? I needed more information. I scoured the document for any clues about the author, but there was nothing. Just a cold, clinical recounting of their actions. Frustrated, I turned off the computer and left the study. I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. I found Sarah in the kitchen, her face tired but kind as she looked up from the dishes. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, my voice strained. She set down the dish she was holding and turned to me, concern etched on her face. "What is it?" I explained everything. The old journal, the photos, the figure in the videos. Her eyes widened in horror as I spoke, but she didn't interrupt. When I finished, she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have to find out who's behind this," I said. "We need to know why they're doing this, and how to stop them." We decided to visit my childhood home again the next day, hoping to find more clues. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead we had. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of the journal and the sinister game we were now a part of. The next morning, we packed up the kids and drove to my old house. I explained as best as I could that we were going on a little adventure, trying to keep things light for their sake. When we arrived, I sent Sarah and the kids to a nearby park while I searched the house. I started in the basement, where I had found the first USB drive. I went through every box, every piece of old furniture, looking for anything that might give me a clue. Hours passed, and I found nothing. Frustrated, I moved upstairs, searching each room methodically. It wasn't until I reached the attic that I found something. Hidden in a dusty old trunk was a box filled with photos and documents. I sifted through them, my heart racing as I recognized faces and places from the journal entries. And then, at the bottom of the box, I found it. A letter, addressed to me. I opened it with shaking hands and began to read. "Dear Andrew, if you're reading this, then you finally found the truth. Our family has a dark history, one that I hoped would never resurface. The person who tormented that family all those years ago, it was your grandfather. He was a troubled man, driven by demons I never understood. I discovered his journal after his death and hid it away, hoping to bury the past. But it seems the past has a way of catching up with us. I'm sorry you had to go through this. I never wanted you to know. But now that you do, you must be careful. There are those who still remember, who might want to continue his twisted game. Protect your family, and don't let them win. With all my love, Dad." The letter fell from my hands as the weight of the truth crashed down on me. My own grandfather had been the one to start this nightmare, and now it was happening again. But why? Was someone trying to continue his legacy? Or was this some kind of twisted revenge? I had no answers, only more questions. But one thing was clear. My family was in danger, and I had to stop this. I gathered the photos, documents, and the letter, and headed back to the park to meet Sarah and the kids. As I walked, a sense of determination settled over me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I would find whoever was behind this, and I would put an end to their sick game once and for all. Armed with the newfound knowledge about my grandfather, I felt a mixture of anger and fear. This revelation turned everything I knew upside down. I met Sarah and the kids at the park, trying to keep my emotions in check. As we drove home, I explained what I had found, and we both agreed that our priority was to protect our family at all costs. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, Sarah and I sat in the living room, poring over the documents. We needed a plan. The letter from my father had hinted that there might be others who wanted to continue my grandfather's twisted game. We needed to find out who they were and why they were targeting us. I decided to reach out to a private investigator, someone with the skills and resources to dig deeper than I could. I found a reputable PI online, a woman named Jessica Carter, who specialized in cold cases and family mysteries. I contacted her and set up a meeting for the next day. Jessica arrived at our house the following morning, a no-nonsense woman with a keen eye and a sympathetic demeanor. I explained everything to her, from the dark web experience to the journal entries and the recent events. She listened intently, taking notes and asking pointed questions. "This is definitely unusual," she said finally, "but I've dealt with stranger cases. I'll start by looking into your grandfather's history and see if there's any connection to recent events." As Jessica began her investigation, I continued to beef up our home security. I installed additional cameras, motion sensors, and even a couple of hidden cameras inside the house. I wanted to be prepared for anything. Days turned into weeks, and Jessica kept us updated on her progress. She found that my grandfather had indeed been involved in some shady activities, but she couldn't find any direct connection to current events. However, she did uncover something disturbing: a group of individuals who shared my grandfather's obsession with fear and control. They called themselves the Watchers. The Watchers operated in the shadows, using fear as their primary weapon. They targeted families, much like mine, and played twisted games to break them down psychologically. Jessica believed that someone from this group was behind the recent events, continuing my grandfather's legacy. The realization that we were up against a group, rather than a single individual, was terrifying. But it also gave us a lead. Jessica managed to find an online forum where the Watchers communicated, hidden deep within the dark web. It was risky, but we needed to confront them directly. With Jessica's help, I created a new account and infiltrated the forum. I posted a message, calling out the Watchers and demanding a meeting. It was a gamble, but I hoped it would draw them out. Hours passed with no response, and just as I was about to give up, a message popped up. Watcher 0. You've learned the truth. Meet us at the abandoned warehouse on 5th and Main, midnight. Come alone. My heart raced as I read the message. It was a trap, of course, but I had no choice. I needed to end this once and for all. I told Sarah about the meeting, and she was understandably scared, but we agreed it was the only way to protect our family. That night, I drove to the warehouse, my mind racing with fear and determination. The streets were empty, the city quiet. I parked a few blocks away and approached the warehouse on foot, staying in the shadows. The warehouse loomed ahead, a dark and imposing structure. I steeled myself and entered through a side door. The interior was dimly lit, filled with rusted machinery and discarded debris. As I ventured further inside, I heard a voice. "Welcome." The voice echoed through the warehouse, sending chills down my spine. I turned to see a figure stepping out of the shadows, followed by several others. They wore dark clothing, their faces obscured by masks. "You've been a worthy player in our game," the figure said, stepping closer. "But now it's time to end it." "What do you want from me?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not about what we want," the figure replied. "It's about what you fear. Your grandfather understood that. Fear is the ultimate control." I clenched my fists, anger boiling inside me. "This ends tonight. No more games, no more threats. Leave my family alone." The figure laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You think it's that simple? We've been doing this for years, perfecting our methods. Your fear fuels us." In that moment, I realized there was only one way to end this. I had to confront my own fear, to show them that they had no power over me. I took a deep breath, focusing on the faces of my family, the love and determination I felt for them. "You're wrong," I said, my voice steady. "Fear doesn't control me, love does, and I won't let you hurt my family." The figure hesitated, the others shifting uneasily. I saw my chance and lunged forward, tackling the leader to the ground. The others moved to intervene, but I fought with everything I had, fueled by a primal need to protect my loved ones. Suddenly, the warehouse was filled with the sound of sirens. Jessica had followed me, calling the police as backup. The Watchers scattered, disappearing into the shadows as the authorities stormed in. I was bruised and battered, but I had won. The police took my statement, and Jessica promised to continue her investigation, determined to bring the Watchers to justice. As I drove home, the weight of what had happened began to lift. We were safe, at least for now. I knew the Watchers were still out there, but they had lost their power over me. I had faced my fear and won. When I walked through the front door, Sarah ran to me, her eyes filled with relief and love. I held her close, knowing that no matter what happened, we would face it together. Our ordeal had changed us, but it had also made us stronger. We were a family, and nothing could break that bond. As we stood there, holding each other, I knew that we would be okay. The nightmare was over, and the future was ours to reclaim. I never thought my life would end up like this, but here I am, typing this out from a dingy internet cafe in a country I never thought I'd step foot in. It all started about a year ago when my identity was leaked on the dark web. I can't pinpoint the exact moment it happened or how they got my information, but looking back, there were signs. Subtle at first, but they escalated quickly. I was a regular guy with a regular job, a software developer working remotely, living a quiet life in a small town. I enjoyed my privacy and kept to myself. I never used social media much and always prided myself on being careful online, but none of that mattered in the end. One night, I received an email from a friend. It was a forwarded link to a dark web forum. At first, I thought it was some kind of prank. My friend had a dark sense of humor, and we often joked about the shadowy corners of the internet. But the subject line caught my attention. "Is this you?" Curiosity got the better of me. I downloaded Tor and navigated to the link. What I saw made my blood run cold. There it was, a thread titled "Fresh Docs John Doe." My real name, my address, my phone number. Everything about me was laid bare for anyone to see. Worse yet, there were intimate details that only someone close to me would know. My social security number, my bank details, even personal photos that I had never shared online. My first reaction was denial. I convinced myself it was a mistake, a sick joke. But deep down, I knew it was real. I called my friend, but he didn't answer. Panic set in as I tried to think of what to do next. I started receiving texts from unknown numbers, threatening messages, and creepy images. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, and each notification felt like a stab to my sanity. I decided to go to the police. I thought they would help, but they seemed almost apathetic. They took down my statement and told me they would look into it, but I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was just another paranoid tech geek. "Stay offline," they said. "Lay low for a while." Laying low didn't help. Over the next few days, I noticed strangers hanging around my house. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. But then, one night, I heard scratching at my front door. I peered through the peephole and saw nothing, but the scratching continued. It sounded like nails against wood, deliberate and unnerving. I called the police again, but by the time they arrived, there was no one there. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. I was constantly on edge, jumping at every little noise. I installed security cameras around my house, hoping to catch whoever was tormenting me. The footage revealed shadows flitting past my windows, figures lurking just out of sight. My tormentors were playing a game, and I was their unwilling pawn. One evening, I received a package with no return address. I should have known better, but my curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a doll, a perfect replica of me, down to the clothes I was wearing that day. Its eyes were black, empty pits, and its mouth was stitched shut. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized this was a warning. They were getting closer. The final straw came when I received an email with an attachment. It was a video of me, recorded through my own webcam. I watched in horror as the camera captured me at my desk, oblivious to the fact that I was being watched. The video ended with a text overlay. "We see you. We're coming." That night, I packed a bag and fled. I left everything behind. My home, my job, my life. I couldn't risk staying any longer. I drove for hours, not knowing where I was headed. I ended up in a cheap motel in another state, trying to figure out my next move. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar face sent me into a panic. I tried to reach out to friends and family, but most of them thought I had lost my mind. Those who believed me were too scared to help. I was alone, a ghost of my former self, constantly looking over my shoulder. My only solace was the anonymity of my new surroundings. But even that was a fragile illusion. Days turned into weeks as I moved from place to place, trying to stay one step ahead. I had no idea who was after me or why they had chosen me, The only thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't go back. My old life was gone, and in its place was a never-ending nightmare. I began to think about leaving the country. It was a drastic step, but it seemed like my only option. I needed to disappear completely, to erase myself from the map. I started researching countries with lax immigration laws, places where I could start over. It was a long shot, but it was all I had left. And so, I find myself here, in a foreign land, surrounded by strangers who don't know my name or my past. I've taken on a new identity, a new life, but the fear still lingers. Every day is a battle to stay hidden, to avoid detection. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again. This is just the beginning of my story. There's more to tell, more horrors that await. But for now, I need to rest. The shadows are lengthening, and I can feel their eyes on me. They're always watching, always waiting, and so I keep moving, hoping that one day I'll find a place where they can't reach me. When I made the decision to leave the country, I knew it wouldn't be easy. There were legal hurdles, logistical challenges, and the constant fear of being caught by my tormentors. But I had no choice. Staying was no longer an option. I reached out to an old contact from my college days, someone who had dabbled in less than legal activities. I hoped he could help me get a fake passport and new identification. His name was Rick, and though we hadn't spoken in years, he agreed to meet me. We arranged to meet at a rundown bar on the outskirts of a nearby city. When I walked in, the place reeked of stale beer and cigarette smoke. Rick was sitting in a corner booth, looking as shady as ever. He eyed me warily as I approached. "You look like shit," he said, motioning for me to sit. "Thanks for meeting me, Rick," I replied, sliding into the booth. I quickly explained my situation, trying to keep my voice steady. Rick listened, his expression unreadable. "You're in deep shit," he finally said, shaking his head. "But I can help you. It'll cost you, though." "I'll pay whatever it takes," I said, my desperation evident. I handed over a stack of cash, all the money I had left after my frantic escape. Rick nodded and pocketed the cash. "I'll need a few days to get everything sorted. Lay low until then." He scribbled an address on a napkin and slid it over to me. "Meet me here in 3 days." For the next 3 days, I barely slept. I holed up in another seedy motel, jumping at every creak and groan of the building. My dreams were plagued by faceless figures and dark, empty eyes. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that doll with its mouth stitched shut. When the time came, I followed Rick's instructions and went to the address he had given me. It was a small apartment in a dilapidated building. Rick was waiting for me inside, a small bag on the table in front of him. "Everything you need is in there," he said, pushing the bag towards me. "Passport, Idaho, some cash. Use it wisely." I opened the bag and inspected its contents. The passport looked real enough, and the ID had my picture but a different name. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this would work. Maybe I could finally disappear. "Thanks, Rick," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "I don't know how to repay you." "Just stay safe," he replied, his voice gruff, "and don't contact me again. The less I know, the better." With my new identity in hand, I booked a one-way flight to a country on the other side of the world. I chose a place where I didn't know anyone and where I hoped no one would know me. It was a long flight, and I spent most of it looking over my shoulder, half expecting to be pulled off the plane at any moment. When I landed, I felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. I had made it out, but I knew this was just the beginning. I found a cheap hostel to stay in and started looking for a more permanent place. I needed to establish myself, to create a new life from scratch. The first few weeks were a blur of paranoia and adjustment. I found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood and paid in cash. I got a job under the table at a local cafe, trying to blend in as much as possible. Every day I forced myself to go through the motions, pretending everything was normal. But normal was a distant memory. I kept to myself, avoiding making any friends or drawing attention. I couldn't afford to let my guard down. I constantly checked my surroundings, watched for anyone who might be following me. The fear was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. One night, as I was walking home from work, I felt a chill run down my spine. I glanced over my shoulder and saw a figure standing under a streetlight, watching me. My heart raced as I quickened my pace, turning down a side street. The figure didn't follow, but the encounter left me shaken. I knew it was only a matter of time before they found me again. The dark web had its tendrils everywhere, and my new identity was just a thin veil. I needed to be more careful, to stay one step ahead. The only way to survive was to keep moving, to never let them catch up. As the weeks turned into months, I tried to settle into my new life. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My paranoia grew, feeding off every shadow and every stranger's glance. I installed more locks on my door, barred my windows, and kept a knife under my pillow. Then, one morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was a single piece of paper with 2 words scrawled in red ink: "Found you." My blood ran cold as I stared at the note, my hands trembling. They had found me. Again. Panic set in as I gathered my things, ready to flee. But where could I go? I had already run halfway across the world, and they were still on my trail. I felt trapped, like a cornered animal. My mind raced with possibilities, but none of them seemed like a viable escape. I decided to go to the police again, hoping they would take me seriously this time. But when I arrived at the station, the officers seemed disinterested, just like before. They took my statement, promised to look into it, and sent me on my way. I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was just another paranoid expat. Defeated, I returned to my apartment and tried to think of my next move. I couldn't stay here. I needed to disappear again, to find a place where they couldn't reach me. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was no escaping them. They would always find me, no matter where I went. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard a faint tapping at my window. My heart pounded as I grabbed the knife from under my pillow and crept towards the sound. I peeked through the curtains and saw a shadowy figure standing outside, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It raised a hand and tapped the window again, the sound echoing through the room. I backed away, my mind racing. They were here. They had found me. I needed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The figure continued to tap, a slow, deliberate rhythm that sent chills down my spine. I knew I couldn't stay, but I couldn't leave either. I was trapped, a prisoner in my own life. As the tapping grew louder, I made a decision. I would confront them, face them head on. Maybe then I could get some answers, find out why they were tormenting me. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and opened the window. The figure stepped back, revealing a face I didn't recognize. It was a man, his eyes cold and empty. He smiled, a chilling grin that sent shivers down my spine. "Hello, John," he said, his voice a low whisper. "We've been waiting for you." Before I could react, he lunged at me, his hands reaching for my throat. I fought back, slashing with the knife, but he was too strong. He overpowered me, pinning me to the ground. "You can't escape us," he hissed, his breath hot against my ear. "We will always find you." I struggled, trying to break free, but his grip was like iron. My vision blurred as I felt consciousness slipping away. The last thing I heard was his sinister laugh, echoing through the darkness, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a dark, unfamiliar room. My hands were tied, and my head throbbed with pain. I had no idea where I was or how I had gotten there. The only thing I knew for certain was that my nightmare was far from over. I woke up to darkness. The air was damp and cold, and I could hear the faint drip of water echoing somewhere nearby. My head throbbed with pain, and my wrists burned where the ropes had rubbed them raw. Panic set in as I struggled to remember what had happened, how I had ended up here. The last thing I remembered was the man at my window, his cold, empty eyes and sinister smile. He had overpowered me, his grip like iron. Now I was tied up in some unknown place, alone and helpless. I tried to calm my racing heart and assess my situation. My eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness, revealing the rough outline of a small, windowless room. I wriggled my wrists, testing the ropes. They were tight, but not impossible to escape. I took a deep breath and began working on the knots, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread. Time seemed to stretch on forever as I struggled, but eventually the ropes loosened enough for me to slip one hand free. With trembling fingers, I untied the rest of my bonds and stood up, my legs shaky from being bound for so long. I felt around the walls, searching for any means of escape. The room was bare, the walls rough and cold to the touch. There was a single door, but it was locked from the outside. Desperation clawed at my mind as I realized how trapped I truly was. Suddenly I heard footsteps approaching. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps stopped, and the door creaked open, revealing the silhouette of a man. It was the same man who had attacked me, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "Good, you're awake," he said, stepping into the room. He carried a small tray with a plate of food and a bottle of water. "You must be hungry." I eyed the tray warily, not trusting his apparent kindness. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. He chuckled and set the tray down on the floor. "You'll find out soon enough," he replied cryptically. "But for now, eat. You'll need your strength." He turned to leave, but I lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "Please, just tell me why. What do you want from me?" He shook me off effortlessly and shoved me back. "All in good time," he said, his smile chilling. "Just behave, and you might survive this." The door slammed shut, and I was alone again. I stared at the tray, my stomach growling despite my fear. I couldn't afford to be weak, so I forced myself to eat, each bite tasting like ash. The water was a relief, though, soothing my parched throat. Days passed in a blur. The man, whom I started to think of as my captor, would come and go, bringing food and water, but offering no answers. The isolation was maddening, and I found myself talking to the walls just to hear something other than my own thoughts. I tried to keep track of time, counting the hours between his visits, but it all started to blend together. I felt myself slipping, my grip on reality weakening. I had to escape, but every attempt I made was thwarted. The door was impenetrable, and there were no windows or vents to exploit. One day, my captor brought someone else with him, a tall, gaunt man with piercing eyes. They spoke in hushed tones, occasionally glancing at me. I strained to hear, but their voices were too low. The tall man approached me, studying me like I was some kind of specimen. "He's ready," he said finally, turning to my captor. "Take him to the chamber." The chamber? The words filled me with dread. Whatever was coming, it couldn't be good. I tried to resist as they grabbed me, but I was too weak from days of captivity. They dragged me out of the room and down a long, narrow hallway. The walls were lined with pipes and wires, and the air grew colder the further we went. We stopped in front of a heavy metal door. The tall man unlocked it and pushed it open, revealing a small room bathed in harsh fluorescent light. In the center was a metal chair, bolted to the floor, with leather straps on the arms and legs. "Sit," the tall man ordered, shoving me towards the chair. I stumbled forward, my legs barely supporting me. They forced me into the chair and strapped me in, the leather biting into my skin. Panic surged through me as I struggled against the restraints, but it was no use. "What do you want from me?" I pleaded, my voice cracking. The tall man ignored my question and began setting up a series of machines and monitors. My captor stood nearby, watching with a detached expression. I realized then that they didn't see me as a person. I was just an object, a tool for whatever twisted purpose they had in mind. The tall man placed electrodes on my temples and chest, the cold metal sending shivers down my spine. He connected the wires to the machines and flipped a switch. A low hum filled the room, and I felt a strange sensation coursing through my body. "What are you doing?" I gasped, fear making it hard to breathe. The tall man finally looked at me, his eyes cold and devoid of empathy. "We're going to see how much you can take," he said simply. Before I could react, he turned a dial on the machine, and a sharp pain shot through my head. I screamed, the sound echoing off the walls. The pain was unlike anything I had ever felt, a searing agony that seemed to penetrate my very soul. They continued the torture for what felt like hours, adjusting the machine to inflict different levels of pain. I lost track of time, my world reduced to a haze of suffering and darkness. When they finally stopped, I was barely conscious, my body limp and broken. They unstrapped me and dragged me back to my cell, tossing me onto the floor like a rag doll. I lay there, unable to move, my mind a fog of pain and despair. I didn't understand why they were doing this, what they hoped to achieve. All I knew was that I couldn't take much more. As I lay there, drifting in and out of consciousness, I heard a voice in my mind. It was faint, but unmistakable. A woman's voice, soothing and calm. "You must stay strong," she said. "You must survive." I clung to the voice, letting it anchor me in the darkness. I didn't know who she was or how she was speaking to me, but her words gave me a glimmer of hope. I couldn't give up. Not yet. I had to find a way out, to escape this nightmare. The days that followed were a blur of pain and fear. They continued their experiments, pushing me to the brink of madness. But through it all, the voice remained, urging me to hold on. I focused on her words, using them to keep my mind intact. Then, one day, the routine changed. My captor entered my cell, his expression tense. "We're moving you," he said curtly. "Get up." I struggled to my feet, my body screaming in protest. They escorted me down another series of hallways, each one more oppressive than the last. Finally, we arrived at a large, dimly lit room filled with strange equipment and screens. In the center of the room was a glass chamber, filled with a thick, swirling mist. My captor and the tall man exchanged a glance, then turned to me. "This is where it ends," the tall man said, his voice cold. "One way or another." They pushed me towards the chamber, and I stumbled forward, my legs barely supporting me. As I reached the glass, the mist parted, revealing a figure inside, a woman, her face obscured by the fog. She looked up, and our eyes met. It was her, the voice from my mind. She was real. "Help me," she whispered, her voice echoing in my mind. "Please help me." I didn't know how, but I knew I had to try. Summoning what little strength I had left, I lunged at the chamber, smashing my fists against the glass. My captors shouted, trying to pull me away, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. With a final, desperate effort, I shattered the glass, the shards cutting into my skin. The mist poured out, enveloping me in its cold embrace. The woman reached out, her touch gentle and reassuring. "Thank you," she said, her voice filling my mind. "You've set me free." The mist swirled around us, and I felt a strange sensation, like I was being pulled in every direction at once. The room disappeared, replaced by a blinding light. And then, just as suddenly, everything went dark. When I woke up, I was lying in a field, the sun shining overhead. I was free, but I knew the nightmare was far from over. They would come for me again, and I had to be ready. But for now, I had a chance to escape, to find out the truth and to fight back. And I would do whatever it took to survive. I lay in the field, the sun's warmth a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive environment I had just escaped. My body ached, the cuts from the glass still fresh and bleeding. I didn't know where I was or how I had gotten here, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was free, at least for the moment. I forced myself to sit up, scanning my surroundings. The field stretched out in all directions, bordered by dense forest. There was no sign of the facility or my captors. I had no idea how long I had been unconscious or how far I had been transported. All I knew was that I needed to keep moving. I stood up, my legs shaky, and started walking towards the forest. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and questions. Who was the woman in the chamber? How had she been able to communicate with me? And what was the purpose of those experiments? As I walked, the voice in my mind returned, soothing and familiar. "You're safe for now," she said, "but we need to keep moving. They'll be looking for us." "Who are you?" I asked aloud, feeling a little foolish talking to myself in an empty field. "My name is Elena," she replied. "I was a prisoner, just like you. They were using me for their experiments, trying to harness my abilities." "Abilities?" I repeated, confusion and curiosity mingling in my mind. "Yes," Elena said. "I have the ability to communicate telepathically, to sense and influence thoughts. They wanted to use my powers for their own purposes, but I resisted. They needed someone else to complete their experiments, and that's when they found you." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I had been a pawn in a twisted game, a test subject for their dark ambitions. But now, with Elena's help, I had a chance to fight back. "We need to find shelter," Elena said, "somewhere we can regroup and plan our next move." I agreed and headed into the forest, the dense foliage providing some cover. We walked for hours, my body protesting with every step. Finally, we came across a small abandoned cabin. It was run down and overgrown with vines, but it would do for now. I pushed open the door, the hinges creaking in protest, and stepped inside. The cabin was dark and musty, but it offered some semblance of safety. I collapsed onto an old, tattered sofa, exhaustion overtaking me. "We should be safe here for a while," Elena said. "We need to rest and gather our strength. There are things you need to know." Things they were hiding from you. I nodded, too tired to argue. I closed my eyes and let sleep take me, Elena's presence a comforting balm to my weary mind. When I woke up, it was dark outside. The cabin was eerily quiet, the only sound the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. I sat up, my body stiff and sore, and glanced around. Elena's voice returned, her tone urgent. "They'll come for us soon," she said, "but we have a little time. I need to tell you about the experiments." I listened intently as Elena explained. The facility was run by a secret organization known as the Collective. They were dedicated to unlocking and weaponizing human potential, using methods that defied ethics and morality. Elena had been one of their prime subjects, her telepathic abilities making her a valuable asset. But she had resisted, refusing to be their tool. When they had captured me, they saw an opportunity to push their experiments further. They had hoped to use my mind as a conduit, amplifying Elena's powers and creating a weapon of unparalleled potency. But when I broke the chamber and freed Elena, their plans were thwarted. "We need to stop them," Elena said. "We can't let them continue their experiments. There are others like us, trapped and suffering. We have to free them." Her words filled me with a sense of purpose. I had been running for so long, consumed by fear and desperation. But now, with Elena by my side, I felt a renewed determination. We had to fight back, to put an end to the Collective's twisted ambitions. "We'll need help," I said, my voice steady. "We can't do this alone." "I know," Elena replied. "There are people who can help us, people who have been fighting the Collective for years. We need to find them." With a plan forming in my mind, I felt a sense of hope. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, I felt like I had a chance. We would find these allies, gather our strength, and take the fight to the Collective. We would free the others and put an end to their experiments once and for all. The next morning, we left the cabin and set out on our journey. Elena guided me, her telepathic abilities leading us towards the people who could help. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the Collective was still hunting us. But with Elena's presence in my mind, I felt stronger, more capable than ever before. Our journey took us through towns and cities, across borders and into hidden enclaves. We moved carefully, avoiding detection and staying one step ahead of our pursuers. Along the way, we found others who had escaped the Collective's clutches, each with their own harrowing stories and unique abilities. Together, we formed a small but determined group, united by a common goal. We trained, shared information, and prepared for the battle ahead. Elena's abilities proved invaluable, her telepathic link keeping us connected and informed. As the days turned into weeks, our numbers grew, and so did our resolve. We were no longer just survivors. We were fighters, ready to take on the Collective and free those still trapped in their nightmarish experiments. The final confrontation was drawing near, and with it, the realization that not all of us would make it out alive. But we were ready to face whatever came our way, knowing that our fight was just and our cause was righteous. As we made our final preparations, I couldn't help but think back to the man I had been before all of this. A regular guy with a regular life, unaware of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of our world. I had lost everything, but in its place, I had found a new purpose, a new sense of belonging. With Elena and our newfound allies by my side, I was ready to face the coming storm. We would fight, we would resist, and we would win. The Collective's reign of terror would end, and we would be the ones to bring it down. The day of reckoning had arrived. Our small group of survivors, bonded by shared trauma and a burning desire for justice, was ready to take the fight to the Collective. We had trained, planned, and prepared for this moment. The fear that had once paralyzed me was now a distant memory, replaced by a fierce determination. Elena led us to an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of a city. According to our sources, this was one of the Collective's main facilities, where they conducted their most secret and sinister experiments. It was heavily guarded, but we had a plan. We approached under the cover of darkness, moving silently through the shadows. Our group split into teams, each with a specific objective. My team was tasked with infiltrating the main building and finding the control room. Elena's telepathic abilities would help us navigate the labyrinthine corridors and avoid detection. We made our way to a side entrance, bypassing the security systems with the help of one of our allies, a former hacker. The door clicked open and we slipped inside. The air was thick with the scent of chemicals and machinery, and the low hum of equipment filled the silence. Elena's voice echoed in my mind, guiding us through the facility. "This way," she said, her tone focused and calm. "The control room is down the hall, to the left." We moved quickly, keeping to the shadows. Every step was a reminder of what we had endured, every heartbeat a testament to our resolve. We reached the control room without incident, but I knew the hardest part was yet to come. Inside, the room was filled with monitors and control panels, manned by a handful of technicians. We took them by surprise, subduing them before they could raise the alarm. I locked the door behind us and began searching for the main terminal. "Here," Elena said, pointing to a large console in the center of the room. "This is where they control the experiments." I nodded and got to work, accessing the system with the help of our hacker. The screens flickered to life, revealing a network of surveillance feeds and data streams. It was a chilling reminder of the scope of the collective's operations. Hundreds of prisoners, each trapped in their own nightmare. "Focus," Elena urged, sensing my growing anger. "We need to shut this down." With her guidance, we began disabling the security systems and unlocking the cells. It was a race against time, knowing that any moment we could be discovered. As the final lock was disengaged, alarms blared throughout the facility. Our cover was blown. "Move!" I shouted, grabbing a nearby radio. "All teams execute the plan. It's now or never." Chaos erupted as our allies sprang into action. Explosions rocked the building, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the halls. We fought our way to the main lab, where the core of the collective's operations was housed. Along the way, we freed as many prisoners as we could, guiding them to safety. We reached the lab, bursting through the doors to find a scene of horror. Rows of people strapped to tables, subjected to torturous experiments. The tall man, the one who had overseen my own torment, stood at the center, his face twisted with rage. "You," he spat, recognizing me instantly. "You can't stop us. You're nothing but a failed experiment." "Not anymore," I replied, raising my weapon. "This ends now." The battle was fierce and brutal. Our group fought with everything we had, driven by the knowledge that failure was not an option. Elena's telepathic abilities proved invaluable, coordinating our attacks and anticipating the enemy's moves. The tall man was formidable, but we were relentless. As the fight raged on, I found myself face to face with him once more. His eyes were filled with hatred, and he lunged at me with a scalpel, aiming for my throat. I dodged and countered, using the training I had received over the past months. Our struggle was intense, a clash of wills and desperation. In the end, it was Elena who delivered the final blow. Using her abilities, she overwhelmed his mind, causing him to collapse in agony. I stood over him, my chest heaving, and watched as the light faded from his eyes. It was over. We secured the lab and freed the remaining prisoners, leading them to safety. The facility was in ruins, and the collective's grip on power had been shattered. But our fight was not yet done. There were other facilities, other victims, and we would not rest until they were all free. As the sun rose on the horizon, casting a new light on our victory, I felt a sense of peace for the first time in what felt like an eternity. We had done it. We had fought back against the darkness and won. Elena stood beside me, her presence a comforting reminder of how far we had come. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We have a long road ahead, but we will see this through." I nodded, knowing she was right. Our journey was far from over, but we were ready. Together we would face whatever came our way, armed with the knowledge that we were stronger than our fears, stronger than the collective. As we walked away from the ruins of the facility, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer the man who had been hunted and tormented. I was a fighter, a survivor, and I would not stop until the collective was nothing but a memory. Our story had been one of pain and suffering, but it was also one of resilience and hope. And as we moved forward, we carried with us the strength of those we had lost and the promise of a brighter future. The nightmare was ending, and a new dawn was rising.